The sun dipped low over the horizon, bleeding shades of crimson and rust across the barren land. The wind swept in hot and slow, dragging with it the scent of old gunpowder and forgotten sins. Jericho Flat sat in the middle of nowhere, a town half dead, half rotting, but still pretending it was alive. And then he came. Clint Eastwood, dressed in a weather-worn poncho and boots coated in desert dust, rode in on a black horse that seemed carved from shadow. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The weight of his silence was heavier than a gallows rope, and the thud of his boots on the ground echoed louder than a gunshot in that empty town. People noticed. Shopkeepers peeked through grimy windows, holding their breath. Children were pulled indoors like whispers being swallowed by fear. Even the sheriff, a bloated man who hadn't drawn his weapon in years, backed away from the window of his office with shaking hands. There was something about him, something that screamed, "This man isn't just passing through." He walked straight down the middle of the main street, eyes cold and fixed forward. The kind of stare that could strip a man of his lies without a single word. And deep down, the people of Jericho Flats knew why he was here. They didn't want to admit it, but they knew. Years ago, the town had made a decision. A stranger had arrived in peace, young, quiet, harmless. But someone needed to take the blame for a crime he didn't commit. The mayor, the preacher, and the sheriff, men with power and no conscience, called a town meeting. They twisted scripture and law into something unholy, and the townspeople nodded along like sheep, too scared to bleat. That stranger was dragged from his bed, beaten senseless, and hanged at dawn in the middle of town square. The same square Clint Eastwood now slowly passed through. No trial, no mercy. Just the illusion of order wrapped in the filth of cowardice. And now, justice had returned, not in the form of a courtroom, but in the shape of a man with a stare that had seen too much and a hand that didn't miss when it drew steel. Inside the saloon, the piano player stopped mid-note, fingers frozen. Laughter turned to silence. Cards hit the table like falling leaves. Clint pushed open the swinging doors, stepping into a room thick with fear and smoke. No one dared meet his eyes, no one except the bartender, who swallowed hard and asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, "What'll it be, stranger?" Clint's reply was as dry as the desert wind. "Justice, served neat." And with that, the room fell cold. Night crept in over Jericho Flats like a slow-moving shadow. Not sudden, not violent, but thick and oppressive. The kind of night where even the stars seemed to keep their distance. Clint Eastwood sat alone in the corner booth of the saloon, untouched whiskey glass in front of him, eyes scanning every whisper, every twitch of guilt, every nervous glance. The town's masks were cracking. Sheriff Dalton, a heavy-set man whose badge gleamed brighter than his backbone, sat trembling behind his desk. He had seen that stare before, not on a wanted poster, but in his nightmares. Years ago, when they strung up that innocent man, Dalton had watched from the shadows. He hadn't raised a finger to stop it. But now his past had ridden into town with spurs that sang of vengeance. Meanwhile, Mayor Hargrove, slick-haired, snake-tongued, and rich from deals written in blood, was already gathering the other men of power in the back room of the old church. They knew exactly who Clint was. He wasn't just a drifter. He was connected to the man they had sacrificed. Maybe a brother, maybe a friend, maybe worse, a man with a debt to settle and nothing left to lose. The mayor's voice was sharp. "He's here to stir trouble. We do what we always do, control the narrative. Shut him down before the town panics." But panic had already begun. The blacksmith boarded up his shop. The preacher cancelled Sunday sermon. Mothers whispered to their children not to look the stranger in the eye. Jericho Flats wasn't just afraid of Clint Eastwood, it was afraid of what he represented, a mirror held up to their collective guilt. Clint didn't knock on doors, he didn't make speeches, he simply appeared, standing outside the sheriff's office in the morning, watching silently. Sitting on the edge of the schoolhouse roof by noon, eyes tracking the mayor's carriage. By dusk he was behind the church, where they buried the stranger all those years ago. Except Clint didn't find a grave. He found nothing, no headstone, no cross, not even a name, just weeds and dirt, as if the town had erased the memory of the man they had murdered, buried him, and buried the guilt with him. Clint dropped to one knee, touched the earth, and whispered something no one else could hear. Then, without a word, he began painting on the wall behind the church, red letters that dripped like blood onto the cracked white brick. Remember him! By morning, the whole town had seen it. By noon, someone had tried to paint over it. By nightfall, Clint painted it again, bigger this time. And this time, he added a date, the exact day they hanged that man in the square. The message was clear. Clint wasn't here to kill them quickly. He was here to make them remember. Morning in Jericho Flats felt different now. The usual rhythm, clinking horseshoes, the hammer of the smith, children running through dust, had been replaced by a strange hush. A heaviness hung in the air. The townsfolk walked with their heads down, avoiding both the message behind the church and the man who wrote it. Clint Eastwood hadn't said a word since he arrived, but every move he made spoke volumes. This morning, he stood in front of the old courthouse, not inside, not on the steps, but right in the middle of the square where years ago a man had swung from a rope while the townspeople watched in silence. Clint stood in the exact spot, boots dug into the dry soil, hat tilted low, a worn piece of parchment in his hands. Then he nailed it to the sheriff's door, one single sheet. On it, the names of 6 men, 6 townsfolk, 6 cowards. Each one had signed the fake testimony that condemned an innocent man to die. They said he stole horses. They said he tried to kill the mayor. All lies wrapped in fear and profit. And now Clint had the names and made sure the whole town saw them. The sheriff came out minutes later, reading the paper with shaking hands. His name was at the top. Mayor Hargrove heard the whispers and rushed down the street in a fury, but stopped dead when he saw the people gathered in silence, staring not at him, but at the man with no mercy. Clint turned to face them slowly. His voice cut through the air, dry, measured, and terrifyingly calm. 6 names, 6 lies, 1 innocent man hanged. This town wrote history in blood. I'm just here to make sure no one forgets the ink. Nobody moved. Even the wind seemed afraid. Then Clint walked away, disappearing into the livery stable. He didn't draw his gun. He didn't need to. That was the warning shot. It wasn't lead. It was truth. And it hit harder. By dusk, 2 of the men on the list had already packed their bags, trying to slip out before judgment came knocking. The town's children asked their fathers what the word perjury meant, and the preacher refused to hold confession. Something had been set loose, not just Clint, but the guilt they buried with the man they killed. And it was only a matter of time before it demanded a reckoning. By the 3rd day, the town was holding its breath. Shutters stayed closed, saloons were near empty, and no one dared ring the church bell. The mayor MS goons, but the ones who usually strutted through Jericho Flats with their silver badges and crooked grins, were suddenly nowhere to be seen. But Clint Eastwood was everywhere. He moved like a shadow through the town, boots echoing on hollow boardwalks. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was waiting for one. And as always, Fate brought it right to his feet. The first to crack was Silas Beckett, the blacksmith. A big man with stronger fists than morals, Silas had been one of the 6 who lied to save his own skin. He didn't expect Clint to call him out by name, but when that list went up, and when the townsfolk looked at him differently, Silas started drinking. Heavy. That afternoon, Clint found him slumped on his porch, a bottle of rye in one hand, a shotgun resting across his lap like a dog guarding its master. Clint didn't knock, he just stood there. Silas squinted, blinking through sweat and shame. His voice was cracked with whiskey and guilt. "I didn't know they'd hang him. I thought he'd get time, not a noose." Clint didn't flinch, didn't speak, just stared, as if measuring the weight of every lie. "You don't understand," Silas growled, staggering to his feet. "They said if I didn't sign, they'd burn my shop. My family, Clint." That name, Clint, came out like a plea, like saying it might soften the judgment standing in front of him. But Clint just said 6 words. "You saved your forge." He lost his life. Silas raised the shotgun in a trembling hand, but he was too slow, too broken. Clint fired once. The shot echoed through Jericho Flats like thunder from a storm long overdue. Silas Beckett collapsed backward onto the porch he built with honest hands, and stained it with the blood of his worst mistake. No one came running, no one screamed, because in that moment the town understood something chilling. Clint wasn't there to kill them. He was there to remind them who they really were, and to punish the ones who forgot. From behind curtains and window panes, the people watched him walk away, smoke still trailing from his revolver, as calm as if he'd just swatted a fly. They knew this was just the beginning. 5 names still remained. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting Jericho Flats in hues of fire and rust. The wind carried the dust like whispers of what Clint Eastwood had done and of what was yet to come. The town gathered not by invitation, but by instinct. In the main square, right outside the Sheriff A.S. office, which had stood silent ever since Clint rode into town, the final confrontation was taking shape. The 5 remaining names on Clint's list stood across from him. Some were trembling, others were puffed up with rage, but none of them had clean hands. Each had sold out Clint's friend, a drifter named Jeb Wallace, to save their own skin, watching silently as the corrupt Mayor S. Posse hanged him without trial. "You think you're judge and jury?" spat Mayor Hollis, stepping forward, voice laced with arrogance. "You think this town gives a damn about a dead drifter?" Clint didn't move, didn't blink, just said, "He was more decent than any of you." The townsfolk, silent and shamed, looked to one another. The weight of years of fear, corruption, and compromise hung in the air like smoke before a fire. Children gripped their mothers, old men clenched their hats. The preacher clutched his worn Bible like it could still save something. And then it happened. One man, a farmer named Eli Turner, stepped forward. He'd been quiet all these years, living with the guilt of watching Jeb get dragged off. But something in Clint's gaze had cracked, whatever cowardice held him back.
"He's right," Eli said, voice shaking. "We let a good man die, and if we let this go, we're just as guilty."
Gasps followed. The other townsfolk began murmuring. Some in fear, some in shame, but many, finally, in resolve. The shift was immediate. Clint didn't smile, but the slight lowering of his gun said everything. Justice was no longer just in his hands. The town was finally waking up. The standoff turned. The 5 corrupt men, the mayor and his enablers, suddenly looked very small, surrounded, alone. "You gonna run, Hollis?" Clint asked. "Or you want to face the justice you denied a better man?" The mayor went for his pistol. Clint was faster.
Final.
The 5th man, the young deputy who had never liked what they did, raised his hands and dropped his badge in the dirt. Silence again. But this time it wasn't fear. It was relief. Clint turned, holstered his revolver, and walked through the crowd. No one stopped him. Some nodded, a few whispered thanks, but all watched with reverence. Because they knew what had just happened wasn't vengeance. It was something far rarer. It was redemption. And as Clint Eastwood rode out of Jericho Flats, the town didn't cheer. They changed.